Hey, what's going on, guys? So today we're talking about who is MMA's GOAT. So we're going to do this video in two different parts, right? It's not going to be two different videos, so it's going to be a little bit longer. So if you like this style, do click that like button to show your support for the channel and subscribe for even more content. But we're going to talk about every single champion currently in the UFC and if they're a potential GOAT. Valentina Shevchenko, since 2011, has 2 blemishes on her record. Those 2 blemishes are what keep her out of the GOAT discussion. Next is the women's strawweight division. Rose still has a lot to do to get to that GOAT category. I do want to say this though. Amanda Nunes is in the GOAT discussion. Now, the unfortunate thing with Brandon Moreno, he just started his run as the flyweight champion, right? And the other unfortunate thing about this division is that Figueiredo never fought Johnson, because Demetrius Johnson won 13 fights in a row, but he's lost 2 of his last 5. Next we have Petr Yan. Petr Yan has 2 losses on his resume, and okay, John Jones isn't undefeated. Like I don't know if you guys know. Like I know he says he is, but he's not. Okay, he lost. I mean, it was a disqualification loss that he was dominated, but he lost. If we don't count that against John Jones, do we really count that against Petr Yan? If Figueiredo jumps to the bantamweight division and becomes a champion, I think that immediately pole vaults him into the GOAT discussion as well. Frankie Edgar's in this division. Dominic Cruz, like where do we rank Dominic Cruz? Injuries and this, that, and the other. And I think, unfortunately, because of the injuries and the layoff, because we're talking about the GOATs here, not to hold anything against. Almost everybody I'm going to mention is an amazing fighter, right? But we're talking about the GOATs here. I gotta hold that against Dominic Cruz. There is an alternate timeline, and I just got done watching the season finale of Loki, where Conor McGregor never feels the need to go up to the lightweight division and just dominates the featherweight division, kind of like what we saw Jose Aldo do right before him. That's something we need to keep in mind when we're talking about Conor McGregor, is that like the lightweight's not his division. It's just unfortunate we'll never get to see Volkanovski versus McGregor. Next we have Charles Oliveira in the lightweight division. Obviously, and there's a reason why Dustin Poirier is pound for pound ranked higher than Charles Oliveira. Dustin Poirier honestly has a more impressive resume than Charles Oliveira. And if Dustin Poirier is able to beat Charles Oliveira, we kind of have to start talking like, where does he rank all time as well? But I don't think he is going to beat Charles Oliveira. That's a discussion for another video. Where do we rank Khabib Nurmagomedov as all time? 29-0 is impressive. Okay, I wouldn't be able to fight any of the guys Khabib fought and beat them. I'm very proud of him. Overstaying your welcome sometimes helps in the GOAT discussion. Would a prime Khabib beat Charles Oliveira? I don't know if that's true. Charles Oliveira's got the most submissions in UFC history. Khabib beat Dustin then. Would he beat Dustin now? What if Khabib fought Tony Ferguson in his prime? And Conor met Khabib in his division and fought him tougher than anybody had ever fought him. I wish Khabib would come back. I think Kamaru Usman is starting to also, he's on that path. He's walking into that discussion. He's a better wrestler than the entire division, Burns included. You can't strike with him. He knocked out Jorge Masvidal, who's probably the best or second best striker in the division. The fighter that he reminds me the most of. So GSP has 2 losses on his resume. So I'm going to start from that first loss, and I'm just going to tell you just the result of every fight, right? So he lost to Matt Hughes, went over Dan Strasser, went over Jason Miller, went over Frank Trigg, went over Sean Shirk, went over BJ Penn, went over Matt Hughes, who beat him. Lost to Matt Serra, went over Josh Koshnick, another win over Matt Hughes, went over Matt Serra, who beat him. Went over John Finch, another win over BJ Penn, went over Thiago Alves, went over Dan Hardy, another win over Josh Koshnick, went over Jake Shields, went over Carlos Condit, went over Nick Diaz, went over Johnny Hendricks, went over Michael Bisping. GSP fought out of his prime for like 5 years and was still just as dominant. Anderson Silva, he had 16 wins in a row in the UFC. And we look again and we're like, Michael Bisping lost, Daniel Cormier lost, Derek Brunson win, and that was his last win, and he's lost to Israel Adesanya. Jared Cannonier beat him as well, and then Uriah Hall. Oh, you used to fight. You had a dominant run and you stopped, right? Where do we put that versus you had a dominant run and you kept going too long? Do we hold that against Khabib that he stopped? I kind of do. Do we hold it against GSP because he stopped? I don't really, because GSP stopped later. How many times have we seen Khabib beat somebody he had beaten already? Never. It's one thing to beat somebody once. We saw what happened to McGregor and Poirier, just for example, too. We saw what happened to Diaz-McGregor as well, too. And we got to start putting some respect on Jan Blachowicz' name. Beat Dominic Reyes, Corey Anderson, Luke Rockhold. But he's on the track, 100%. But we can't talk about this division without talking about the elephant in the room. There's 3 fighters that I hear people always have in their GOAT discussion. I've already mentioned 2 of them, Amanda Nunes and George St. Pierre. There's only one other one that I always hear. And this was the division he dominated. And I've mentioned him already because he had 1 loss to DQ and no other losses. So you gotta ask, where do you put Jon Jones? Let's say his last fight was a loss, because a lot of people say his last fight against Dominic Reyes was a loss. He had 20 straight wins in the UFC. Technically 21, but 1 was turned over to a no contest because of the drugs. 14 of these were title fights. Mauricio Rua, Quentin Jackson, Lyoto Machida, Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, Chael Sonnen, Alexander Gustafsson. Stop me when you hear someone not impressive. Glover Teixeira, Daniel Cormier, Vincent Prue, I butchered that name. Gustafsson the second time. Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos, and then Dominic Reyes. Francis Ngannou is not really in the discussion. I do want to give credit where credit's due to Stipe Miocic. He doesn't have the most impressive record ever. But where do we rank Stipe? If Stipe is able to avenge his loss to Francis Ngannou, and then he beats Jon Jones when Jon Jones is done training. Everybody thinks Stipe is done. Don't count him out just yet. Here's my list. And let me know what your guys' list is down in the comments below. Number 5 is Demetrious Johnson. I don't know what credit we give to a guy who started a division. It's why I haven't mentioned the name Ronda Rousey. Some of these guys beat like 15 amazing fighters. Now, Demetrious Johnson's run as the UFC's flyweight division was so insane to me that I have him as number 5. And I wish more than anything he would come back to the UFC. There's another timeline going back to the Loki stuff where Anderson Silva retires instead of fighting until he's 45. And he's number 1 on this list. I can't unsee Israel Adesanya telling Silva to come here in the middle of their fight. His run was impressive, but it was at a time when the UFC wasn't as powerful and strong as it is now. Which is why the next fighter, or if the other 2 fighters ahead of him were not active, he would be number 1. But I have George St. Pierre as number 3 only because he is done building his legacy. What Anderson Silva tried to do, George St. Pierre did successfully. Jason Miller and Dave Strasser and Matt Hughes. That was kind of the era before GSP. BJ Penn, Josh Kostek, Matt Serra. That was the era that was GSP's prime. Carlos Condit, Nick Diaz, Johnny Hendricks. These were after GSP was no longer in his prime. I just mentioned 2 active fighters. Number 2, purely because of competition, I have Amanda Nunes. Conor was a champ. Amanda Nunes is a champ. She's fought in 2 different divisions. You go to the UFC rankings, there aren't top contenders in the featherweight division because they're just all bantamweight basically against Amanda Nunes. Jon Jones is the greatest fighter in UFC's history. Look at who he's beaten. Even if you don't even include Dominic Reyes, look at who he's beaten. Even if he loses every fight for the rest of his career. Because he's not done. What happens? Okay, Jon Jones wins 5 fights in the heavyweight division and then retires. Like, he's still active, technically. So, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Who are your top 5 greatest UFC fighters of all time? Try to just keep it to the UFC. A young Ben Askren dominated Bellator. Didn't do super well in the UFC, right? So, let me know what you guys think in those comments down below. Click that like button to show your support for the channel. Subscribe for even more content. Most importantly of all, have a good day.